Chapter 1051. Never meant to be played alone. What would the result of this clash be? No one could predict it, and no one had the time to predict it. This DPS competition really only lasted for a duration less than 20 seconds. Everyone used their most efficient methods of DPS. Those slow and powerful skills were all a waste of time in this situation. The health bars of both sides were plummeting, but from this, it was evident that in the wild dash to kill the other, there was a method to their madness. Happy was evidently focusing their fire on combat form. Combat form's original 55% of health was instantly forgotten. From when the fight erupted, this number had been dropping constantly, plummeting in free fall. Considering character strength, Happy was nothing compared to Excellent Era, but Happy had an extra person. The three focused their fire in this battle where defense was neglected for more DPS, it would be easy to wipe a character out. But for Happy, their actual situation wasn't as good as things seemed. Even combined, the health of their characters were less than either of Excellent Era's. An extra person gave them more DPS. However, without a solid amount of health as a foundation, how could they make sure they would be able to keep up this DPS? The one with the most health among the three of them was Lord Grimm's 13%. In this situation, with everyone going all out, he'd be wiped out instantly if one Autumn Leaf and combat form focused their fire on him. Happy was at a major disadvantage. The only thing that could turn this around for them was their cleric, but what would happen during the time it took for their cleric to arrive? Would Happy be able to hold on until then? This period of time was a mere instant, but it was in this mere instant that the audience personally saw an advantage that was unique to the unspecialized class, the seamless transition between all of the low-level skills. No single class had so many short CD low-level skills. With the battle where it was, no one would wait for all your skills to come off cooldown before unleashing them, so, for any class, after the battle began, there would never be a time where its skill tree would be wholesome because used skills would go on cooldown. The more intense the battle, the more skills were on cooldown. Excellent Era versus Happy had already gotten to a point where the battle raged so intensely, that it couldn't get more intense. Under this situation, Lord Grimm's skill options was still mostly complete. You could only say mostly. After all, Lord Grimm was also continuously using skills, and low-leveled skills also had cooldowns. However, this mostly complete was an absolute advantage over any other character in this fight. The battle had reached its peak. Even the greatest player would feel like they didn't have enough skills. Seamlessly cycling through a comboed set of skills? That was PvE. Only PvE would have something like that. This was PvP, and it was a high-end PvP match. There was no time for anyone to cycle through skills without disruption like in PvE. A fast-paced battle would soon make people feel like they had no skills to use and less choices to make. Pro players were good at controlling their rhythm as to not fall into an awkward disadvantage. However, no matter what, they still had to use skills, and there would always be cooldowns. As the pace went up, the room they had to maneuver would decrease. But the unspecialized didn't have this problem. Thus, when Happy was fighting with their backs to the wall and both sides felt like their skills weren't enough for the battle, Yishu's Lord Grimm still managed to fight at his fastest pace. While the offense of the others began to seem rather thinned out, Lord Grimm still had sleeves full of tricks. Not needing to worry about cooldowns and having skills to use anywhere anywhen was something that probably only occurred in the wet dreams of most players. Yet now, the unspecialized had turned this dream into a reality. Especially in this sort of crucial moment, the unspecialized's ability was magnified further as the opponent's skills diminished. An unused skill was always the most terrifying skill. And the unspecialized skills were always at an unused state because he had more skills, because his skills had shorter cooldowns. Happy managed to hold on in the few seconds it took Little Cold Hands to arrive, but no one fully understood what, exactly, happened in those few seconds. The advantage Unspecialized had in this crucial moment wasn't something bystanders could glean, but those who were directly involved. Only Sun Xiang and Chu Fei truly understood what sort of disadvantage they had when fighting against Lord Grimm. As for the commentators of the broadcast, they were still lamenting over Little Cold Hand's arrival for Excellent Era. "No, it's not over yet," Li Yibo suddenly exclaimed. Lord Grimm's best efforts in restricting his opponents were just to help his own side endure this period. This was already an absurd result. However, Sun Xiang and Chu Fei's offense hadn't been truly interrupted. Happy's 3 had still taken quite a few hits, it was just that none of them had been fatal. With Little Cold Hand's arrival, he saw the pitiful health bars of Happy's trio and didn't dare use chanted skills. He was afraid they might die in the time it took him to complete his chants. Instantly, 2 instant cast cures were sent over. And then, there was no then. After that, healing would require chanting. The 3 instant cast cures had all been thrown out already. Healers weren't gods. There was still a limit to their healing ability. However, Happy's characters really had too little blood. At this point, they couldn't really hold on for much longer. There were situations that even a healer couldn't save. Having used up all his instant casts, and when Yi could only start to chant a heal. Yet right when he was about to do so, he suddenly saw a message from Yishu in the chat, Holy Calm. Holy Commandment? Not wanting healing at such a time but DPS support? Everyone who saw Yishu's command was completely stunned, all thinking they were hallucinating and wondering if this abbreviation had some other meaning. It couldn't possibly be that he wanted the healer to not heal, but support their offense. The audience was hesitant, but the players on the field weren't. Seeing the order, and when Yi didn't think twice before a holy commandment was immediately thrown out. The target was combat form who had less health and was obviously Happy's focus. If and when Yi couldn't even make this sort of judgment, when he really had to apologize for all the effort Yishu had gone through to dig him out of those players in tyrannical ambition. The holy commandment enveloped combat form. It wasn't just the audience that was shocked by the holy commandment from Little Cold Hands, even Sun Shang and Chu Fei felt puzzled. However, they had no time to stop and consider. With the opponent's cleric here, they were pressed for time. If they couldn't storm their opponents and Little Cold Hands managed to hold their health up, then the ending would be set. Attack. Continue the attack. Sun Shang and Chu Fei had long since been prepared to mount their furious attack against this healing. This was the scene Xiao Shiken had set for them. After bringing down the health of 2 members of Happy, Sun Shang and Chu Fei would use the time it took for the cleric to arrive to intensify their attacks. Being able to take down even one before the cleric arrived would allow them to maintain a chance of victory. It wasn't easy. We can do it. Sun Shang and Chu Fei were red-eyed with bloodthirsty. Nothing else existed for them. They stared at the last scraps of blood that Happy's characters had, attacking, taking it down. Success. Steamed Bun Invasion's health was wiped, a situation even a healer couldn't save. Steamed Bun Invasion fell to Excellent Era's offense. And then, 1-inch Ash's health was already in the decimal range, could they take him down, too? Another one fallen. 1-inch Ash fell, a second kill. Success. 2 versus 2, so what if there's a healer? The eventual victory will be ours. Sun Zhang's heart soared and there was finally only one opponent left in front of him. He had one autumn leaf lunge wildly. He could finally defeat this person. Who would have expected that Lord Grimm would suddenly jump up, sending out anti-tank missiles at combat form, his characters flying backwards from the recoil. Sun Shang turned his view with this attack. What he saw caused him to charge over like he had gone crazy, trying to use his own body to block the 3 anti-tank missiles. But it was too late. Everything was too late. Lord Grimm didn't just send out anti-tank missiles. A grenade had also rolled over, across the ground. Combat form, Chu Fei's combat form had run out of health. The shadow that had been with him the whole way, helping him. In truth, Sun Shang hadn't thought that he was very important, but in that moment, he truly wished to save combat form from death, willing, even, to use his own character, one autumn leaf, to shield his shadow from death. But it was all too late. Engulfed by the light of the explosion, combat form could no longer escape and his health fell to 0. Combat form, he had fallen. In the player booth, no one could hear how Sun Shang had screamed. One autumn leaf suddenly turned, a skill that had just come off of cooldown was flung forth. Dragon breaks the ranks. In pursuit of Lord Grimm, who had flown out backwards, he caught up in the blink of an eye. Die, Sun Shang bellowed out through gritted teeth, uncaring that the other couldn't hear this roars. Lord Grimm, airborne, was incapable of dodging this strike. He could only unsheath his sword to guard, but he was still knocked out of the air from the force of the attack. Yet before Lord Grimm even hit the ground, a holy light washed over him. Holy heal. This was the heal that required the longest cast time, but also healed the largest amount of health, and it accurately engulfed Lord Grimm. 15%. The high-end heal that needed an immense cast time instantly pulled Lord Grimm's health up by that much. Sun Shang felt his despair return. 1 versus 2 and the opponent had a healer. This situation. Didn't I tell you before, glory was never meant to be played alone. Now, Sun Shang, what do you say? Lord Grimm sent in the public chat as the holy heal descended. Glory was never meant to be played alone? Saying this when you were fighting 2-on-1 with a healer on your side? This made everyone speechless, but no one could retort it. This was an example of a situation going from hopeful to despair. Sun Shang hadn't wanted to give up yet and aimed to hurry and take out Little Cold Hands first. However, the moment he saw Yishu's words, his fighting spirit extinguished. He knew that he wouldn't get a chance to do so. Yes, glory was never meant to be played alone. After replying with the same words, Sun Shang didn't type GG. He directly left the match. Chapter 1052. We are the champions. It's over. The system announced Team Happy's victory, and after that the system automatically gave a few close-ups of the surviving characters. Shots of Lord Grimm, with his colorful equipment, and Little Cold Hands at all sorts of angles were being displayed on the screen. However, no one really reacted properly. Their hearts were still in their throats, waiting for a final explosion of attacks. This was because one Autumn Leaf still had over 40% of his health left. Though he had to fight 1-on-2, Excellent Era had a lead in the group arena. If he went all out, he might be able to at least take one person down even if he couldn't get them both. That way, it would at least end with a tie. Yet Sun Shang had just the match left like that? Did the system disconnect him? No one dared to believe the reality before their eyes, and even the referee had to check the game system to confirm that Sun Shang really did surrender and it wasn't some sort of mistake. After that, he finally announced that Happy had won the team competition, gaining 2 points. In the end of the Challenger League, Team Happy won 2-1 against Team Excellent Era. Fuck. An enraged bellow came from Excellent Era's bench. Their boss, Dao Zan, suddenly seemed to have been possessed by the battle god or something and jumped up, smashing the water bottle in his hand against the side of the stage. They lost? They actually lost? Dao Zan didn't dare to believe his eyes. His Team Excellent Era, the powerhouse Team Excellent Era, with top players like Sun Shang and Xiao Shikan, and spectacular characters like One Autumn Leaf and Life Extinguisher had actually lost to the grassroots team Yishu had let out from nowhere. How was that possible? Ha ha ha, well played, well played. That was when someone from Team Happy's bench also stood up. Wei Chen extended his hands towards Excellent Era's bench, purposefully applauding for them to see and hear. His expression was one of nonchalance though, as if there was nothing much to their victory. Stop pretending, alright. Chen Guo, who had almost began crying when their victory was announced, didn't know whether to laugh or cry at Wei Chen's actions. This guy had obviously been jumping for joy at this, but purposefully feigned nonchalance to anger Excellent Era. You might say that, but your tone is still trembling, man. We won. Chen Guo turned her head around and said to Su Mucheng, who sat next to her. Su Mucheng was supposed to be an opponent in this competition, and she was even responsible for the point that Excellent Era had gained, but Chen Guo saw her as one of their own. Yes, we won, Su Mucheng nodded. I'm glad I didn't waste my time coming out here. Sun Jeping let out a long breath, stretching out in his seat. We won, we won, we won. Although Luo Ji hadn't gone up in this match, he was just as happy as everyone else was. He wanted to find someone to share this victory with, yet when he turned his head, he found that it was Mo Fan that sat closest to him, staring at the stage with his characteristic emotionless expression. We won, Luo Ji hollered at him. Mo Fan turned his head, looking at him emotionlessly. Luo Ji decided to walk a few more steps so he could celebrate with the others. He charged forward and joined Chen Guo and the others. Yet, he hadn't noticed that, although Mo Fan hadn't spoken, though he was still stoic, his hand, in that moment, had clenched into a fist. Happy's bench had exploded with celebration, while Excellent Era's bench was dead silent. Their boss's explosion of rage caused them to shrink back into their seats with their heads lowered, as if no one could see them that way. That was when the audience there finally recovered. They won. Happy actually won. Seven Fields opened his mouth and stayed stunned for a full half minute until the person next to him nudged him. Fuck, 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 fuck. 7 Fields turned this way and that, cursing and spitting everywhere, but none of the people around him minded, grabbing him tightly. We won. Yes, we won. Holy fuck, we won. 7 Fields gave the loudest cheer yet. Happy's group of loyal fans, surrounded by Excellent Era's fans, erupted as one. They threw everything in their hands that they could throw up into the air, cheering and yelling, singing and dancing about. The security guard in the stadium were poised, ready to take action just in case, but didn't go up to stop them. Happy's victory truly hadn't come easily. If they didn't allow them to celebrate, that would just be cruel. As for Excellent Era's fans, they were all dumbstruck. Contemplate if Sun Zhang's departure from the game was accidental or not. They weren't in the mood for that anymore. No matter what, the end was set and Happy was the final victor. As for their team Excellent Era, would they have to stay in the Challenger League another year? They were a powerhouse team with God-level players and God-level accounts, but they had to sink in the Challenger League for another year? Currently, all the Excellent Era fans could feel was sadness, disappointment, and discomfort. Happy won. In the broadcast, when the system announced the victor, commentator Pan Lin had announced the result with a tone full of uncertainty. Even he was incredulous. Yes, Happy won. A miracle. They've truly created a real miracle. Li Yibo, on the other hand, had gotten back into character and couldn't help but sigh with deep emotion. This is completely unexpected. Happy has defeated Excellent Era, winning this year's Challenger League. They will become newcomers to the Pro Alliance next season. As for Excellent Era, this powerhouse team that created the only dynasty in Glory history is once again subject to another year of the Challenger League, and the one to put them into this situation is, coincidentally, the ex-captain that built that very dynasty. For Excellent Era, is he an angel or a demon? I believe all of Excellent Era's people are feeling very conflicted right now. They must regret letting Yi Shu enter retirement so easily. Quote. After Pan Lin recovered from his shock, he leapt back into character. Happy's victory was truly unexpected, but there was much to say about it, too. Pan Lin swiftly formulated a response and began to commentate. Now, the award ceremony began immediately after the match. All of Happy's players would have to go on stage to obtain their awards. Chen Guo was their boss, but she was also a registered member of Team Happy. Though she had barely played a single match, she still had the right to come on stage. Chen Guo was very proud of herself, walking on stage with the others. On stage, the players had already stepped out of their booths. Yi Shu, Tang Ru, Steamed Bun, Wu Chen, Chao Yifan, and Wen Yi. Everyone's gaze landed on them. Apart from Yi Shu, the others were complete unknowns. Yet just now, they had created a miracle. They really defeated Excellent Era in the Challenger League, taking the only slot and entering the alliance. The present was no longer Excellent Era's world. In this moment, applause filled the venue. With the results out, those who had been hoping for this result, hoping for Happy to win, no longer needed to hide. They could express their support and respect openly. As for Excellent Era's competition booths, Sun Shang, Xiao Shikan, Zhang Jiaxing, Shen Jian, Wang Zi, Chu Fei. Apart from Chu Fei, they were all people with at least some renown in the pro circle, and some were even gods. Yet in that moment, they were failures. This stage was no longer theirs and they didn't have the heart to watch their opponents crowning. They silently left the stage on one side. Excellent Era's bench was still in complete silence. No one went up to comfort their returning teammates. It was their boss, Dao Zan, who charged up to Sun Shang like a dragon breaks the ranks. The match wasn't over. Why did you leave? Dao Zan roared at Sun Shang. I couldn't win. Sun Shang shook his head. How would you know that without trying? Even if you couldn't win, you could still tie by defeating one of them and bring us into overtime, Dao Zan bellowed. I wouldn't be able to, because glory was never meant to be played alone, Sun Shang said. Dao Zan was stunned. This was what Yi Shu had said to Sun Shang on the field. Yet at this time, Sun Shang had used it to retort against him. Yi Shu. Gazing at the figure on stage, Yi Shu was quite a ways away and Dao Zan couldn't see his face clearly. However, as his once upon a time most dear friend, he should have been able to imagine this friend's smile without seeing it, but why was it that his mind was in such a mess? After so long of running this team, what had he gained? And what had he lost? Glory was never meant to be played alone? This sentence seemed to be true not only for the battlefield. Dao Zhan stared for a while and then sat back down dejectedly. He raised his head to look around and saw that all around him, there were people clapping for Happy. Dao Zhan knew there were quite a few Excellent Era fans here, but where had they gone now? How did they feel about this result? Team Excellent Era. Dao Zhan gazed at the stage. Excellent Era's team logo stood tall here at Excellent Era's bench. On a stage without a spotlight, it seemed dulled. The award ceremony had long since been prepared for, the only thing that would need to be changed was who to give it to. The ceremony had already begun by then and the MC naturally had to go and interview Happy a little bit before bringing the trophy up. Happy's victory is, for most, an unexpected and shocking event. How do you feel about this? The host threw the question at Happy's captain, who was also Excellent Era's ex-captain, Yi Shu. Excellent Era was a formidable opponent, but Happy won the match. We are the champions. This is our glory, Yi Shu said. The opponent was strong, but we won the match. This was more like a courtesy in a pro match, but here, no one would take it as just that. This was because Excellent Era truly was a powerful opponent, far stronger than Happy, but Happy still won. That's right. It was just that simple. That was what competition meant. That was what glory meant. You're stronger than us, but we won the match. So, we are the champions. Chapter 1053. Reopening a can of worms. The entire stadium was filled with applause. This sort of finale made all those spectators who were hoping to witness a miracle feel that their journey was completely worthwhile. Applause, screaming, the host, having only just gotten the chance to ask one question, couldn't continue amongst this noise. He had to wait a full minute for the noise to die down. The host hurried to grasp this opportunity, throwing out a second question. Next is a question about you, personally. As the ex-captain of Excellent Era, winning this match, I think many people are curious as to what your feelings are right now. This question was like a signal and the entire audience immediately fell silent. The MC's words weren't exaggerated at all, everyone was immensely curious about this topic. Nothing really. To me, victory is the most important, Yi Shu said mildly. Then is there anything you want to say to Excellent Era? The MC was obviously unsatisfied with Yi Shu's answer. He wanted to hear something more juicy regarding the relationship between the two. Continue to work hard, Yi Shu's answer was still as calm as ever. The MC gave up on that train of thought and could only continue with the next question. There's another thing everyone is curious about. In the past, you never revealed yourself to the public, but how come you've changed this habit with your return? Hey, no reason in particular. I guess I was just going with the flow, Yi Shu replied nonchalantly. The three successive questions hadn't elicited any interesting information and the Ma couldn't accept this. He just really couldn't. He wasn't some randomly assigned newbie, he was a very professional Glory reporter and had interviewed countless pro players. He knew which Glory pro players were hard to deal with in media. However, after these three questions, the MC understood. Friends in the media, don't think for a second that Yi Shu accepting interviews is a boon. There's probably going to be another player placed on the list of impossible to interview players. Alright. Next, let's welcome the chairman of the Glory Alliance, Mr. Feng Xianjun, to hand the trophy to Team Happy, as well as the certificate of qualification to the Pro League. Seeing that the award ceremony preparations had finished, the MC didn't continue the interview. Out of the 4 questions, 3 were directly at Yi Shu personally and were topics that were popular prior to the match. Feng Xianjun walked up the steps and onto the stage, smiling in a relaxed way and coming to shake the hands of every member of Happy and congratulate them. In Happy's lineup, there were 2 that were familiar faces for Feng Xianjun. You can still play. When shaking Sun Ziping's right hand, the chairman intentionally used more strength than necessary, smiling. Not much, but it's still enough. Even facing the chairman, Sun Ziping was still the same as ever. Feng Xianjun smiled, nodding, and ended the conversation there, continuing down the line to shake hands. Wei Chen was a player from the first 2 generations and back then, Feng Xianjun wasn't the chairman yet, so they weren't really too familiar. They conversed normally before he finally arrived in front of Yi Shu. I shouldn't have expected anything less from you, Feng Xianjun said, shaking Yi Shu's hand. Hey, Yi Shu chuckled, you didn't write the wrong name on the certificate, did you? You should be careful to not write the wrong name yourself, Feng Xianjun retorted, smiling. The quiet conversation went unheard by anyone else. Outsiders only saw their peaceful smiling faces. Then Feng Xianjun turned and grasped the trophy, handing it to Yi Shu. Yi Shu accepted it and raised it high as the crowd exploded into applause once more. The MC loudly announced the champions, but in truth, the value of the Challenger League wasn't in the trophy, but the beautifully printed certificate Feng Xianjun then handed over. The qualification certificate to the Pro League. With this, it meant that Happy had the right to enter the Pro League next season, and that was what everyone was truly fighting to take. Champions of the Challenger League? That was never the final destination, but a starting point, one that started from this very certificate. Yi Shu accepted the certificate and saw Team Happy printed there. The certificate had been prepared long ago, but the team name was only printed after the final result had been revealed. Happy's other members had already clustered around and Feng Xianjun stepped to the side, letting them share their joy and leaving the celebrations to them. Tonight, they were the main characters. As for those side characters who had failed, they wouldn't be completely ignored. Feng Xianjun then went over to Team Excellent Era and gave a few words of comfort and encouragement. As for the reporters, they were already looking at Excellent Era like tigers watching their prey. They had already prepared who knows how many questions, waiting to launch them at Excellent Era. They had already been told that this Challenger League match had a press conference afterwards. Never had this been arranged for the Challenger League before. It was clear how much importance the Alliance placed on this year's Challenger League match in comparison to the past. However, the reality was less grandiose, not enough popularity. However, this year, with the topic of Yi Shu versus Excellent Era, they had arranged for time to gossip afterwards. The first to appear at the press conference was Team Excellent Era. The manager Kui Li, as well as Sun Xiang, Xiao Shikan, and the other Excellent Era players all attended the press conference, sitting on the stage dumbly. No one initiated conversation. They were all silent. There was complete silence and the reporters were looking at each other as well. Losing the Challenger League was probably even worse than losing the championship match, especially for a powerhouse team like Excellent Era. The reporters felt sorry for them, but their professionalism wouldn't allow them take mercy on Excellent Era just because they were sorry for the loss. After sitting in mournful silence with Excellent Era for half a minute, some reporters probably felt that they had met a quota for their sympathy and raised their hands to ask questions. The members of Excellent Era were still sitting there numbly. In the end, it was an Alliance news manager who began to choose reporters to ask questions from the side. During the match, Su Mucheng suddenly declared that she and Excellent Era were over and sat on Happy's side of the bench. Could you explain why this is? Is there any bad blood between Su Mucheng and Excellent Era? Upon asking the first question, the reporters had chosen a difficult question for Excellent Era. However, they were all people who had experience with worldly situations. Kui Li glanced at the reporter and said without emotion, Su Mucheng is still a member of Team Excellent Era and Excellent Era will convene with the players before making decisions regarding their futures. Before then, there's nothing to say. Then may I ask how Excellent Era convened with Yi Shu when he announced his retirement? From the match today, I doubt that anyone would believe that Yi Shu is a player who should retire. He's in a surprisingly good state that doesn't lose to any of Excellent Era's players. Quote, the question that followed hit an even sorer spot for Excellent Era. This was a problem that Excellent Era's PR had wanted to disperse. Since Yi Shu refused to accept interviews, it had made things convenient for Excellent Era. It was more or less whatever they said that goes. Yet now this old can of worms had been reopened after the finale of the Challenger League. When Yi Shu had originally announced his retirement, everyone wanted to know the reason. However, since he was a very private person, no one was able to gain first-hand knowledge from the man himself. Excellent Era was their only source of information to gain this information from. Under this situation, it was easy for Excellent Era to guide the discussion. They had to first cover up the truth of Yi Shu's retirement and then mix in the truth of Excellent Era's slipping performance. That Yi Shu's skill was slipping had been a logical excuse. With Yi Shu's habits, quietly retiring wasn't unexpected. The fans might be sorrowful, but they still accepted this truth. They had thought it had all blown over. Who would have expected that Yi Shu would build up another team from scratch after leaving Excellent Era and then fight them in the Challenger League? This wasn't something Excellent Era had planned for. After creating a lie, they could only weave more lies around it to prevent it from falling apart. It was a good thing that Yi Shu refused to appear in public, so Excellent Era held the reins of the discussion. Yi Shu had never come out to say anything. Even after qualifying for the offline matches in the Challenger League and accepting some interviews, he had never expressed any form of concern towards these problems. Even so, upon seeing Yi Shu accepting an interview for the first time, Excellent Era had panicked. They made preparations of all sorts of public backlash, but it was all for nothing. What they worried about was nothing to Yi Shu. Even now, Yi Shu still didn't say anything. However, he won the match. Nothing was more convincing than this. You say Yi Shu's skill has slipped? Then defeat him if you can. He had beat Excellent Era with a grassroots team. Never mind not being able to see any slips in his ability. Even if his ability had slipped, no one would believe it after seeing such a conclusion. Had Yi Shu's state worsened to the point of needing to retire? No one was more clear on this than Excellent Era. The reason they wanted Yi Shu to retire was precisely because they knew that Yi Shu was still skilled, terrifyingly so. They wanted to give up on Yi Shu, but were afraid that Yi Shu would be a threat to them after becoming an opponent. They took more than they were given, and the situation had spiraled out of control. Now, with this powerful reality as evidence, this question was like a knife's edge for them. Even worse, Yi Shu no longer refused the media, and soon enough, he would be sitting in this exact same place, facing the same reporters, and possibly answering the same questions. The days of being the only voice in the discussion had gone and would never be back. When Excellent Era had wished Yi Shu would walk onto the stage and get close to the media, promoting the team and himself, Yi Shu had refused. Now, when Excellent Era hoped that Yi Shu could continue keeping his head down and refuse the reporters, he decided to stand up. He hadn't said anything yet, but just the fact that he was willing to accept interviews caused Excellent Era to feel like they were sitting on pins and needles. Then, that last victory was an even stronger, clearer slap to the face. Manager Kui? Team leader Kui? In his trance, Kui Li seemed to hear a voice calling out to him. He wanted to respond, but his body was no longer in his control. Doctor, is there a doctor here? Call an ambulance, someone's fainted. The press conference descended into chaos. Chapter 1054. The Fate of a God. In the end, Kui Li was carried out on a stretcher, accompanied by an entourage of flashes. After the press conference had been disrupted, Excellent Era's press officer charged in, stopping the reporters that would like nothing more than to follow them all the way and take pictures. Sorry everyone, but with this incident, the interviews will end here today, the press officer said, ignoring the complaints of the reporters and herding the attending members of Excellent Era out. The reporters loudly objected, but Excellent Era was steadfast in their decision, leaving "We'll be holding another press conference in the near future, so you're welcome to come and ask whatever inquiries you have." Then, in the blink of an eye, all of Excellent Era's people had left. The reporters couldn't do anything about Excellent Era's steadfast decision, which ignored any way they could condemn them with their words. However, while they only had the chance to ask 2 questions, they managed to elicit very interesting responses. A question that could cause the answering side to faint? How much information was Excellent Era hiding in regards to the answer behind this question? Though they might not get an answer today, the reporters wouldn't be discouraged. A monk might be able to run, but his monastery couldn't. It wasn't like such a large organization such as Excellent Era could disappear overnight. The reporters were all formulating their plans for the following interview. Excellent Era might have escaped, but the press conference would continue. No matter how famous Excellent Era was, or how much there was to talk about, the champions were the true main characters of the night. The reporters waited patiently. If they couldn't get their answers from Excellent Era, then they would get them from Happy. The central figure to all of these questions was a part of Team Happy, after all. Yet after waiting for a long time, they were still left without their targets. That was when the press officer of the Alliance walked in with an awkward expression on his face. His originally impeccable suit was wrinkled all over. Sorry everyone, but the press conference today will have to end here. The press officer walked on stage and, seeing the anxious gazes below, announced with embarrassment. What? All the reporters crashed to the ground. You've got to be fucking kidding me, someone hollered. What about Happy? That's right, Happy's players haven't arrived yet. Happy's people, they left. The press officer also sounded depressed as he informed the others. After the award ceremony, all the employees had come to clean the place up. There was quite a lot of chaos. Pro players all knew what to do. For example, Team Excellent Era's players went to wait for the press conference backstage without prompting. As for Happy? Well, they left. Yup, they left. They didn't tell anyone, and no one noticed. This was because this was impossible to anyone with common sense. No one would be on guard for the team that had just finished a match. Thus, Team Happy really did leave. It wasn't until the press conference was ready to start when the Alliance realized that only Excellent Era was present, while Happy was nowhere to be seen. The employees looked for them everywhere with all their might, but they couldn't find anything. In the end, they asked around before finally getting word that a large group of people had left, yelling, "We're the champions." Happy's player? Or Happy's fans? They didn't know. All they knew was that Happy's people had left. They had stood up the press conference. It was a good thing that Happy was going second, being the victors, so the Alliance still held a slither of hope. They hurried to find a way to contact Happy, rushing to get Happy back before Excellent Era's press conference ended. Who would have thought that Excellent Era wouldn't be so cooperative either? It was only the second question and someone had already fainted. The Alliance couldn't stop them from ending the press conference with this reason. However, on the other side, they hadn't even found Happy's contact info yet. Chairman Feng Xianjun, having been informed of this, was stunned. No way? In the past, it was Yi Shu who refused to attend these kinds of events. Could it be that the entirety of Happy would refuse to attend these events now? That was too against the rules. That was most certainly not allowed to happen. We must find him and figure out what this is about. That was the order the chairman gave. They had found Happy's number and hurriedly called, but no one ever picked up. The Alliance was helpless in this situation and they couldn't have the reporters wait there forever, so the press officer had to go and announce that the press conference was over. The press officer knew how awkward this situation was and was prepared to be surrounded and bombarded by the complaints of reporters, but Happy had left and they couldn't find them, so what could they do? The press officer could only face things with a strained smile. The finals of the Challenger League, the press conference with all the juicy information that the reporters had been waiting for, yet it had been stopped with the fainting of a single person? No one would accept that. The media stands had all begun to plan out their next steps. The media groups with idle soldiers stationed in H City all moved their troops out towards Happy Internet Cafe and Club Excellent Era. Do you really think you can escape us? But the next day, Club Excellent Era suddenly announced that they would no longer be answering inquiries from the media. The reason, they explained, was because losing the Challenger League had brought their development to a grinding halt. Now, they had a lot of problems to deal with and didn't have the time or energy to deal with the media. This reason seemed rather legit. Team Excellent Era had never thought they would lose the Challenger League. Their plans for the past year were all in regards to the Pro League and winning the championships. Now they had to stay in the Challenger League another year. The second coming of such a disaster was really more than they could deal with. Even disregarding the Sun Shang, Xiao Shikan, these gods, who had stayed with Excellent Era in the Challenger League for a year already, wouldn't accept having to go another year. Not just these gods, but Zhang Jiaxing, Shen Jian, these pros, who could easily find a place in the Alliance, wouldn't be willing to continue to play in the Challenger League. There was also the rookie, Chu Fei, who, according to the media of City B, was being sought out by Team Tiny Herb, who was looking for a chance to negotiate his transfer with Excellent Era. This news came from a small, local paper and wasn't necessarily trustworthy, but it clearly showed that the Challenger League was a waste of even Chu Fei's talent. Could Excellent Era keep these players? There were, indeed, many troublesome things that Excellent Era had to deal with, but right now, the media wouldn't believe that they refused to respond to inquiries because they were busy. They were busy, but the reason they didn't want to face the media was because they had something to hide. The more they had to hide, the more interested the media would be in digging up their secrets. Excellent Era might have closed themselves off to the media, but the media was omnipresent and would always find a way to attack from a different angle. First of all, they found out from one of the receptionists at Happy Internet Cafe how exactly Yi Shu came to their internet cafe. Though they knew that Happy was only a road apart from Excellent Era, running to an internet cafe after leaving Excellent Era really didn't suit the status of a god of the Alliance. Yet they didn't think it really was just as things seemed. Happy Internet Cafe's receptionist didn't hide anything, openly admitting that Yi Shu had come to the Internet Cafe and asked for a computer, then, seeing the notice that they were looking for employees, applied for the position. A god of glory, after announcing his retirement, had come to an Internet Cafe for work? Then, the reporters were given a tour of Happy Internet Cafe and the places God Yi Shu had fought from. There was a small bed and a whole bunch of miscellaneous items in the small storage room. The reporters almost cried. Was this the fate of the first-generation god that built up Excellent Era's dynasty and made the title of Battle God resound throughout the entire glory scene? On the morrow, the media was full of pictures of this heartbreaking storage room. The big websites and internet celebs were also all reposting this, and some TV companies even wanted to come and film on site. The glory scene was shocked. The fans were shocked. The reason for Yi Shu's departure from Excellent Era was no longer of importance. Was this what the general, who had poured sweat and tears into taking the team to its pinnacle, got for all his hard work after retirement? Working in an internet cafe, living in a doghouse? How could they do this? One of the randomly interviewed glory players exclaimed. I can't imagine that a god like Yi Shu would receive this sort of treatment after retirement. I can't imagine how Excellent Era must treat its players. Will there still be any pros willing to play for them after this? Oh, that's not right. What pro would be willing to go to a team in the Challenger League? This player really could trash talk, wiping a fistful of salt over Excellent Era's wounds. Yi Shu, in this situation, after retirement? This can't be true, right? It isn't some sort of scam, is it? There were also some who were doubtful. This is so hard to believe. What kind of club is Excellent Era? It doesn't matter what they've achieved. Letting the person who brought them to such heights fall into such destitution. All I can say to that is that they truly are heartless. This kind of team deserves to be relegated. Good work, Yi Shu. I watched the finals of the Challenger League. Spectacular, amazing, awesome, fuck. I think this is suspicious. Think of what value God Yi Shu has. All he did was retire. Why is it like he's cutting all ties or something? This is suspicious, too suspicious. The aforementioned interviews weren't conducted with Excellent Era supports. Apart from the few doubtful ones, the others all cursed openly, unafraid of the consequences. As for Excellent Era fans? In the face of this truth, they were heartbroken, sorrowful, wanting to explain things for their team but not able to find an excuse. I think it's not as simple as it seems. There must be something more to it. In the hearts of Excellent Era's fans, they still had hope for the better. They all wanted to believe that their god and their team held love for one another. Fuck, this must be Yi Shu's way of getting pity and intentionally trying to tarnish Excellent Era's name. Who the hell would believe that this is what happened to a god like that? Not me, at least. There were also those who still supported Excellent Era and ignored the truth, deriving things through their own logic. I don't know, and then there were some fans who were like Team Excellent Era when faced with this question. They fell silent, unable to answer. No matter what, all that was left was hurt. However, most Excellent Era fans couldn't stand this torment and held massive gatherings, protesting in front of Club Excellent Era daily and requesting the club to end their silence and give an explanation. Chapter 1055. Excellent Era's silence. The Challenger League finals came to an end on Friday night. The following evening was the 37th round of the regular season of the Season 9 Glory Pro League, as well as the second-to-last round. A few teams had their rankings set in stone by then, but some were still fighting for a place in the playoffs or the right to stay in the alliance. Yet on such a crucial match day, there was a blanket of reports on the results of the Challenger League finals. Happy had truly created a miracle. The entire Glory Circle was enthusiastically discussing this topic. And on the following Sunday, the pitiful truth surrounding Yi Shu's treatment after his retirement had elicited another wave of attention and discussion. All of Glory was discussing this gossip. The media fell right to Yi Shu's side in this argument, all ganging up on Excellent Era together. Amongst the majority of Glory players, Excellent Era also took the brunt of shame and disdain. The pro circle also placed heavy importance on this. Many media groups used mobile, QQ, and other methods to interview pro players on their opinions. This is a disgrace, Han Wenking, the captain of Team Tyranny, who had already cemented their place as first in the regular season, stated in anger. Considering the position Yishu has in the glory circle, I believe all the pros are bitterly disappointed in Team Excellent Era for the situation that they left Yishu in after his retirement, was Team Blue Rain's captain, Yu Wenzhou's opinion. Without a doubt, Yishu has been treated unfairly, Team Tiny Herb's captain, Wang Jiaxi, said. This isn't right, Team Samsara's captain, Zhou Zikai, expressed. The pro players from the powerhouse teams almost seem to have discussed this beforehand and condemned Excellent Era for their behavior solemnly. Team Excellent Era was facing an unprecedented crisis of trust. As the media group holding the most authority in the glory circle, Esports Home liberally used up pages to report this shocking news on their Monday issue. On the other hand, the crucial 37th round of matches was only given a casual report of the results on the front page. The contents of the matches were several pages in. The news that took up the most eye-catching placements were all on the Challenger League, Yishu and Excellent Era. Esports Home never exaggerated just to attract attention. Excellent Era, which had hurriedly gone silent and hid away from the public, was like a guilty coward in the eyes of the people. From the media to the normal players, pressure was being placed on them from all sides. However, Excellent Era was strangely stubborn with their public relations this time and didn't make any moves to soothe the situation. Club Excellent Era's doors were sealed and the players that gathered at their building never managed to catch a single member of Excellent Era. No one knew what Excellent Era was thinking. Many people sensed something strange from Excellent Era's inaction. The protests continued for 2 days and, Wednesday evening, a piece of news began to circulate online. Someone said they had seen a meeting between the higher-ups of Excellent Era and Samsara in City S. What was Excellent Era planning? This rumor without proof immediately had people's thoughts spiraling out of control. At such a time, Excellent Era interacting with other teams was a very strange sight. Was Excellent Era planning to give up on itself and throw a clearance sale? The rumors spread rapidly. Immediately, reporters were sent to Club Samsara to divulge the truth from them. Team Samsara ended up being very open about it, openly admitting that they were in negotiations with Excellent Era about purchases, but they didn't leak anything about the contents of these negotiations. Even after the June 6 Friday issue of Esports Home came out, Excellent Era still maintained their silence and ignored all the requests and demands from the fans. June 7 was the last day of the regular season, but on this day, Excellent Era finally opened up to the media and what they had to say was a massive bombshell. Club Excellent Era was up for sale. The boss of Excellent Era, Dao Zhan, told his spokesman to say that after being the head of Excellent Era for all this time, he felt bone-deep exhaustion. It was time for him to change his lifestyle. Thus, he had decided to sell Club Excellent Era and hoped that his successor could bring Excellent Era glory once more. As for him, personally, he would always be Excellent Era's most loyal fan. It sounded nice, but everyone knew what this was about with a glance. Excellent Era could endure this crisis and didn't plan to try. Boss Dao Zhan was already preparing to abandon ship. However, was it so easy to find someone to accept current Excellent Era? Excellent Era, having not made any attempt to soothe public relations, only found themselves with more and more dirt being dug out. Now, Excellent Era's name had been completely tarnished and not even their glorious dynasty of the past could save them. Not only was their name dragged through the dirt, they didn't have the qualifications to the Pro League either. Disregarding this though, their hardware was still the cream of the crop in the glory circle, and this made the selling of Excellent Era very complicated. In simple terms, Excellent Era's hardware was as spectacular as ever, but its software was nothing but a mess. Yet it was this software that truly represented the value of the two words, Excellent Era. Now that the software was destroyed, no one would want this anymore. As for the hardware, if anyone wanted it, they could seek out that they needed. With Excellent Era and Samsara already in negotiations, this was made very clear. Team Samsara wouldn't purchase Excellent Era. What were they interested in, seeking out Excellent Era for negotiations? Players. Characters. After coming to such a realization, Excellent Era's fans panicked. Putting Excellent Era up for sale. This was clearly a clearance sale preceding Excellent Era's disbandment. After this, could Excellent Era still stay alive? For Excellent Era's fans, this wasn't something that they could ever accept. No matter if Excellent Era was good or bad, they had entrusted so much to Excellent Era. That was something that would never change. With what had happened, they were panicking. After all, no one would ever want to see their team in such a state. Some people might leave, but there would always be those that stayed, hoping that their team would stand once more, that they would be able to be at their team's side forever. Yet now, Excellent Era was facing disbandment and might disappear forever. The team they had poured their hearts and souls into to support, the team they had cheered for so long, would cease to exist like this? No. Not long after the news came out, Club Excellent Era was surrounded by countless people. They were far more irrational than those who had been demanding an explanation from the team. With time running out, they weren't able to make many preparations. They could only yell again and again to express their feelings. They didn't want the club to be sold. No matter what, they wanted to walk with their team until the end.